Hey guys, Pete here. Today I wanted to talk about the Log Lady. This is in my series of character profiles of characters in Twin Peaks: The Return. And like many people, the Log Lady was always one of my favorites in the original series. This will contain spoilers for Season 3 all the way up until now at Episode 10, but that's going to be at the end of the video, so I'll give another spoiler warning at that point, and we'll talk about everything else first. So you don't have to click away yet if you aren't caught up with Season 3 through Part 10. And before I get into the character, I would like to talk about the actress who played her, Catherine Coulson. She passed away at age 71 back in 2015. And it's remarkable that when we see her, Twin Peaks started shooting on location in the same month that she died. So of course they could have shot some of her scenes since they were done on a soundstage. They could have done them beforehand. But when we see her in The Return, it's basically at the very end of her life. She was suffering from cancer. So that adds an emotional layer for me personally. So I just want to talk a little bit about her first. She was an associate of David Lynch's since the 1970s. She worked as an assistant director in the production of Eraserhead, one of his earliest and most notable films. She was actually going to act in it as she had a part, but then they changed things up. And if you're familiar with Eraserhead, you know that the guy Jack Nance, who played Pete Martell in the Twin Peaks original series, he had a starring role in Eraserhead. He was actually married to the Log Lady, Catherine Coulson, for a couple of years before she married her second husband, and she had children and all that after the fact. So Twin Peaks is what I know her from. She did several other things in the industry. She acted all through her life, and she really developed an interesting character. The idea for the Log Lady actually was thought up way before Twin Peaks actually came out. It was also conceived in the 70s when Lynch was going to do a TV show that was going to be called I'll Test My Log with Every Branch of Knowledge. So the concept basically was that this person, played by the same actress, walked around with the log. She went around and did a bunch of things with the log. So it was changed a little bit for Twin Peaks, but the idea of her carrying around the log came way before. So in the series, she was known for walking around with this log. She was one of the quirkiest of the quirky characters in Twin Peaks. She claimed that the log could perceive different things, including events, and it basically knew things. Nobody else could hear the log except for her, and this pretty much made everyone think she was crazy. She also spoke in a very puzzling sort of way, but the fact of the matter is if you looked at it, the things that her log said or that she interpreted from the log were actually real things. Clearly, something supernatural was going on with her in this log. Some of the members of the Bookhouse Boys, like Sheriff Harry Truman and Deputy Hawk, pretty much recognized this. And we saw this in the original series, that they didn't think she was crazy. Later in The Secret History, we get a detailed bio of her to fill in the blanks, like more information about her, and it's more of the same. It was written by Dr. Jacoby's brother, who we never really saw in the television series, but he was a good friend of hers, and he basically defends her and also explains her history leading up to what we see in the television show. So her story starts out in The Secret History. We found out that when she was a child, that her and two other boys, Carl Rod, who we know from Fire Walk with Me in Season 3, and a guy named Alan Traherne, went out on a camping trip and they disappeared. And we see that she did see a doctor when they came back because of intense thirst and hunger. The kids didn't realize they were gone very long, but they were actually gone for a couple of days. And when she returned, she had a pattern of raised skin on the back of her right knee. She graduated from Twin Peaks High, and then she went to Evergreen University, where she studied wildlife management and forestry. She married a local logger, Samson Sam Lanterman, and he wasn't just a logger, he was actually a super competitor in the lumberjack competitions. Like, he won everything and eventually stopped competing so that other people had a chance to win. I'm not going to go into their whole story, but yeah, they were together for a year. They married a year to the day after they first met. It's a very old-fashioned courting, and he supposedly fell for her right away when he saw her doing some work, and they just, for someone who had never really been like the dating type or the marrying type, these two just hit it off right away. Unfortunately, on their wedding night, there was a big fire. Sam was killed because he was also a local volunteer fireman, and when he went to go fight the blaze, he fell into a ravine. The next day, she went up into the mountains around the area around Glastonbury Grove, and she cut a log from a Douglas Fir that had fallen during that same fire, and that's where she got her log, and she carried it around with her from then on. In 1983, we know that Laura Palmer visited Margaret, and the log lady told her about owls and several things that she knew about Laura. On the night of February 18th, 1989, we saw Margaret stop Laura outside the local roadhouse and firewalk with me. She basically placed her hand on the log, then put it on Laura's forehead, and she said, "When this kind of fire starts, it's very hard to put out. The tender boughs of innocence burn first, and the wind rises, and then all goodness is in jeopardy." On the night of February 23rd, when Laura was murdered, the log lady cried and cradled her log at home. The next time we saw her was when Special Agent Cooper had called people together to talk about them taking over the murder investigation. We saw Margaret flick the lights on and off, shushing everybody in the audience. After that, she shows up at the Double R, and she hears Cooper talking about Laura, so she goes over and she says that her log saw something the night of the murder. And she tells Cooper to ask it, but he doesn't say anything, so she just walks away. She was at Laura's funeral a couple days later, and then after that, we had that scene where we had Deputy Hawk, Cooper, Dr. Hayward, and Harry S. Truman all went to her cabin where she was actually waiting for them. She tells them that they were 2 days late. She gave them a little explanation about her husband, who was a logger, and said how he met the devil in the form of fire the day after their wedding. And this is when Hawk has that quote where he says that the wood holds many spirits. Again, she says that her log saw something the night of Laura's murder, and she shows it to Cooper, and then she speaks for the log and says that it saw darkness, laughter, owls flying, 2 men, 2 girls, flashlights in the woods over the ridge, quiet, and then footsteps of a man, and then not long after, she alleged the log heard the screams of a girl further up over the ridge. We saw that she has a strange habit of chewing that gum, which she would spit out, and, we saw her stick it against the wall in the Double R. We saw her meet up with Major Briggs at the Double R, and they talked about his markings on the back of his neck from whenever he went away. And she tells him the log has a message, and the message is deliver the message. And I talked about this in my Major Briggs breakdown. He understands what this means, and he goes off to the sheriff and Agent Cooper. She also visits them at the sheriff's department and tells them there are owls in the roadhouse. And she told Cooper that something was happening. They all went together, and she basically ate a bunch of peanuts. We saw her at Dougie Milford's wedding. She didn't do much, though. She just said basically that she had loved Milford weddings because they were, married quite a few times. Her and Briggs went together to the sheriff's department to show them their markings. Remember, Briggs are 3 triangles, and hers are the 2 peaks, like the 2 mountains. She says that she remembered hearing the call of an owl when she received these markings as a child, and she also heard that sound before her husband died. We saw her at the Miss Twin Peaks contest. We also know that Wyndham Earle impersonated her there. He was trying to abduct the queen, which turned out to be Annie, and he did that. Pete Martell, because of that, thought that she had stolen his truck, but it was actually Wyndham Earl. And she brought along a jar with oil in it to Agent Cooper, which her husband retrieved and said was, he called, I should say, an opening to a gateway. So that's everything that we learned from The Secret History and what we saw in the original series. Now, 25 years later, so yeah, if you're not caught up in season 3, you might want to stop watching now. So 25 years later, we saw her. She is sick at home. She has to use an oxygen mask. She calls up Hawk at the sheriff's office, and she tells him that something's missing and that he has to find it. It's related to Agent Cooper, and the way that he was going to find it had something to do with his heritage. She later called him on his phone when we saw him approaching Glastonbury Grove, which I talked about in my Hawk video because it really doesn't make a lot of sense. But she says here that the stars turn and a time presents itself, and then asks him to come by and tell her what happened at her cabin, and she'll have pie and coffee for him. Then in part 10, we heard her call Hawk once again, and this is where she goes into the Laura is the one speech. It boiled down to her saying that the presence of electricity was around and it was fading. It was a fading glow. The Trumans were good people. They were true men, and they were Hawk's brothers. She said the circle was almost complete, and she told Hawk to watch and listen to the dream of time and space. It all comes out now flowing like a river, that which is and is not. And at the end, she said Laura is the one. Now, I brought this up in that 10 Things You Might Have Missed video, that she said something very similar to this in the Log Lady intros. Those intros were written by Lynch for her, and they coincided with the show being shown in syndication on the Bravo network. Some interesting things about her is that the scar that she has, we saw in the show it was the 2 peaks, but in The Secret History it's described as like the marking that Major Briggs has, but when it was rearranged by Agent Cooper. So that is a strange anomaly, one of the many ones from The Secret History to the show. One of the big fan theories about her has always been that one of the woodsmen that we saw in the meeting room above the convenience store, the guys that were known as the woodsmen, one of them was her husband. Of course, an obvious theory is that her husband's inside the log because she got it the day after he died. And we had that comment from Hawk about the wood holding many spirits. And then we also saw when Josie died that she was trapped in a wooden door or wooden knob to a drawer in the Great Northern. But whenever she was asked about it, the actress, Catherine Coulson, was asked about it, she said that the log to her was more like a memento of the log lady's late husband. That's the way that she always saw it. Another interesting thing was that in Deer Meadow, that sort of strange little woman that comes in whenever Harry Dean Stanton is talking to Chet Desmond, that lady is wearing the same sweater as the log lady. Same print anyways. I don't know if it's the exact same sweater. So yeah, she's always been a cool character. She's always stood out as mysterious, but also you kind of had a feeling that there was a reason for her being there, like she probably knew something. Obviously, when we saw that Carl Rod could see things in season 3, that kind of added a little bit more validity to what her log actually does, like that it is a spiritual connection that she has. I mean, I use the word spiritual because I don't know what else to say, but she does see things in advance and then she delivers them as riddles. So it's not always useful, but it always turns out to be true in the end. So I'm hoping that we'll see more of her and get more of her. If you're a fan of the character, you should definitely, you should read The Secret History of Twin Peaks anyways. Like it's really worth it. I have a link in my video description where you can find it. But if you're a fan of the Log Lady, the story there about her childhood, it's very interesting, and it's kind of a little bit quirky, but it gives you a whole different perspective on her. I mean, I went through the major parts, but there's a lot more there, and it's definitely worth checking out. So what do you think? Primarily, what do you think about what she said in the last episode? Do you think Hawk actually understands what she says? A lot of people think that when she was talking to him on the cell phone, when he went up to Glastonbury Grove, that was out of sequence, so that has yet to happen. I really don't know how I feel about that yet, but it is a thing I made a whole video about. I mean, what the hell happened there? You know, we saw him show up, we saw her call, but no one's mentioned it since. And do you think she's going to play a big part in the rest of the series? This video is getting long. I could talk about her and basically ramble on, but I'm going to cut it short here. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Let me know who you want to see another character profile on. I would like to do it. There's so many of those intros. Someone brought it up, doing an intro, a video on those intros. I may do that, so let me know if you'd like to see that. It's just too long to put together with a character profile. Please subscribe to my channel. Check back regularly because I got a ton of Twin Peaks stuff coming out until the return winds up. Please follow me on Twitter and my other social media accounts. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.